Marine Le Pen's national rally had been favourite to top the polls in the French parliamentary elections. Her party's defeat signals at least a temporary pushback against a far-right surge in Europe. But the result also heralds a period of difficult negotiations and political instability for the Eurozone's second largest economy.
I think what this means is that we're facing a prolonged period of political uncertainty that could mean policy paralysis in the coming months, perhaps even the next year. The Fifth Constitution says that the President cannot dissolve Parliament, or Parliament cannot be dissolved by a vote of no confidence for 12 months after a parliamentary election. So we're stuck with this configuration in Parliament for the next 12 months. If there is political deadlock in the negotiations, there will be policy deadlock in Parliament. By convention, under the Fifth Republic, the President has gone to the bloc with the largest number of seats in the lower house to pick a Prime Minister. But he doesn't have to do that. And the expectation now is that he will wait a few days to see how things shake out. There is the possibility that we could see some forces from the leftist alliance seek to build a coalition with some forces from Macron's own centrist camp. And if they can go to Macron and say, we can build a broad coalition which will carry an absolute majority, then Macron would be entitled to go to that new alliance and pick a prime minister from there. It will be a huge disappointment for the far right. They've seen something of a remarkable ascendancy in France, and this has mirrored also the rise of populism across Europe. They had a real shot at power. We see that the strategy that was led by the centrist alliance and the left-wing alliance, who agreed to work together to pull candidates from constituencies where there was a three-way vote in order to create an anti-RN vote, that strategy worked. They still have more lawmakers in Parliament than they have ever had, but it will surely be a disappointment. So Macron emerges from this parliamentary election undoubtedly weakened. His authority has been severely dented. When he came to power in 2017, he had a massive majority in the parliament, and basically all things trickled down from Macron. He was the architect of French policymaking. Now what we're going to see is a real shift, I think, in the center of gravity of French politics from the President's office, the Élysée Palace, to Parliament.
U.S. President Joe Biden told his fellow Democrats Monday that he is firmly committed to staying in the 2024 presidential race. That's according to this letter from Biden to the party's congressional delegation, as the 81-year-old seeks to head off concerns the party could lose both the White House and Congress in the November 5th election. Over the weekend, more Democratic members of the House of Representatives called on Biden to step aside after his stumbling debate performance against his 78-year-old Republican challenger, former President Donald Trump. Biden wrote in part, quote, "The question of how to move forward has been well aired for over a week now, and it's time for it to end." Continuing, "We have one job, and that is to beat Donald Trump." He also told MSNBC in an interview Monday, quote, "I'm not going anywhere." Biden on Sunday made a series of campaign appearances in Pennsylvania, a battleground state that traditionally can decide in an election. He was joined by Senator John Fetterman, a high-profile Democrat who has rejected calls for Biden to drop out. But conversations about Biden staying in the race were certain to intensify when lawmakers returned to Capitol Hill on Monday. A Reuters Ipsos poll last week found that 1 in 3 Democratic registered voters believe that Biden should quit the race, with 59% of respondents in the president's party saying he is too old to work in government. Biden's troubles appear to be increasing the number of races Democrats need to worry about in November. Internal party polling shows that New Mexico and Virginia became more competitive following the debate, according to a source familiar with the findings. And the nonpartisan Center for Politics at the University of Virginia last week shifted its ratings on the states of Michigan and Minnesota to make each slightly more favorable for Republicans.
South Korea's president is set to discuss with NATO leaders the distinct threat North Korea's deepening military ties with Russia pose to Europe, with the Transatlantic Security Alliance meeting in Washington starting Tuesday. In a written response to questions from Reuters ahead of his visit to Washington, Yoon Suk-yeol said, quote, "North Korea is clearly a menace to the international society," adding that he hopes Russia will sensibly decide which side, the South or the North, is more important and necessary for its own interests. His remarks come as North Korean state media released footage on Monday of what it said was an elite military training delegation preparing to fly to Russia. Reuters could not independently verify the video. KCNA said it was the first such exchange between the two countries since their leaders signed a pact in June pledging closer military cooperation. Seoul protested the treaty at the time as its relations with Moscow soured while Pyongyang grew closer. In his comments to Reuters, Yoon said, "Military cooperation between Russia and North Korea poses a distinct threat and grave challenge to the peace and security on the Korean peninsula and in Europe." He added that Seoul would make a decision on weapons support for Ukraine based on how Moscow and Pyongyang's new military pact plays out. In response to Yoon's comments, Russia said it fully disagreed. A Kremlin spokesman said in a post on social media, Moscow supports building good relations with its neighbors, but South Korea has imposed sanctions on Russia while the North is a partner. Yoon has pushed for greater security ties with Europe and other US allies to deter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. He has also looked to boost the South's role in global security on issues such as Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the US-China rivalry. South Korea is among 4 Asia-Pacific partners that will join talks at the NATO summit midweek, as the military alliance also celebrates its 75th anniversary.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin welcomed NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg at the Pentagon on Monday, ahead of a NATO summit of world leaders in Washington this week.
This summit will celebrate 75 years of the greatest defensive alliance in history.
The summit, which kicks off Tuesday, marks the 75th anniversary of the Cold War-era alliance.
Representatives of 12 nations of Western Europe and North America assemble for the signing of the North Atlantic Treaty.
The gathering is also meant to showcase the leadership of U.S. President Joe Biden, who rallied NATO allies to show new unity and purpose in the face of Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Biden underscored that point during a visit to France in June.
The United States and NATO and a coalition of more than 50 countries standing strong with Ukraine. We will not walk away.
But looming over what was meant to be a symbol of American-led unity is the potential return to power of Republican President Donald Trump, a change that could upend U.S. foreign policy. The Republicans' penchant for praising Putin and his threats that NATO members needed to pay more for mutual defense have alarmed allies.
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, "Well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us?" I said, "You didn't pay? You're delinquent?" He said, "Yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills."
Worries among NATO allies have grown since Biden fumbled a June 27th debate, boosting Trump in the polls ahead of a November 5th election. That means this week's summit, instead of highlighting Biden's diplomatic accomplishments, will be laser-focused on his fitness to hold office and whether he will still be president in 2025. Charles Kupchan is a professor of international relations at Georgetown University.
I think that right across the alliance, right across NATO members, including Ukraine, there is hope, if not prayer, for a second Biden term, because Biden did reinvigorate the Atlantic Alliance. Biden has led the effort to support Ukraine. And in contrast, Trump turned his back on the allies during his first term in office. He mused about withdrawing from NATO. He has said during this election campaign, if there are NATO members who don't spend enough on defense, I'm going to tell the Russians to have their way with them. And there is concern that the United States could withdraw from NATO if President Trump is returned to office.
While much of the attention will focus on Biden amid growing calls within his own party to step aside, the delegates will have a full agenda focused on military and financial aid for Ukraine and offering some pathway toward its eventual NATO membership.
West Africa's main economic and political bloc has said it will pursue more vigorous reconciliation efforts with Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. That's after the breakaway, junta-led countries signed a confederation treaty on Saturday, underscoring their determination to leave the 15-member Economic Community of West African states. In a communiqué on Monday, ECOWAS said it was disappointed by a lack of progress with the three nations. And at the opening of a summit in Nigeria's capital Abuja on Sunday, ECOWAS Commission President Umar Toure warned that the region risks disintegration and worsening insecurity.
To complicate the situation, our region has become the arena of geostrategic and geopolitical rivalries and the theater of misinformation and disinformation that engenders mistrust among and within communities and undermines social cohesion.
Juntas seized control in Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger between 2020 and 2023. They have severed military and diplomatic ties with regional allies and Western powers and moved closer to Russia. The signing of the Confederation Treaty on Saturday took place at the first summit of their Alliance of Sahel States, or AES. It's not clear how closely the AES will harmonise political, economic and defence policies as it struggles to contain a decade-old battle with jihadist insurgents and grow economies that are among the world's poorest. But one thing they made clear at the weekend, they want to face these challenges with their backs to ECOWAS.
The Greek island of Naxos's biggest reservoir has been sucked dry, and with the country's islands set to flood with a record number of summer tourists, the strain on water supplies has rarely been heavier, officials, farmers and scientists say. Naxos is a mountainous island with a population of just 20,000, but its beauty and weather attracts tens of thousands of visitors each day over peak season. The prospect has hotel owners like Vangelis Katsaris on edge.
In recent years, there's been a problem with water shortages, and this year in particular, we are experiencing it more intensely.
Most of Greece has seen little or no rain in months, with the impact of climate change bringing higher temperatures, erratic rainfall and wildfires. The island's two reservoirs currently hold a third of last year's levels, the equivalent of just a few dozen Olympic swimming pools. 3 portable desalination units have been secured to treat seawater to make it safe to drink. Mayor Dimitris Lianos says that should cover the shortfall for houses, hotels and pools.
We believe there will be some problems, not daily, but in some areas, some higher regions. But we believe there will not be serious problems such as water cuts in villages. We believe things will go well, and that is why we took all these measures.
Other industries, though, won't be so fortunate. Farmers won't receive any of the treated water and will have to rely on wells contaminated by seawater aquifers. They say this contamination happens when the wells are empty enough for the salty water to creep in. It threatens Naxos's famous potatoes, grown by farmers like Stelios Vathrakokoulis, who says the use of salty irrigation water will halve his yields.
It's a big disappointment. We humans did not succeed in foreseeing that climate change was going to knock on our doors as well as the rest of the world. And if this continues, may the Virgin Mary help us. That's all I can say.
Countries across the Mediterranean are looking for ways to back up their water supplies by using desalination. But suppliers say units were in short supply this summer due to soaring demand. And climate experts fear the worst is yet to come, saying once the effects of drought become visible, it is too late to take action.
French shares rebounded from an early drop on Monday. Markets were wary after elections left France facing a hung parliament and the prospect of tough negotiations to form a government. A surprise left-wing surge in Sunday's vote blocked Marine Le Pen bringing the far right to power, but no single group secured a working majority. France's blue-chip CAC 40 index dropped 0.6% in early trade, while French government bond prices dipped. But shares soon recovered, rising around 0.5% by mid-morning. Investors had feared a far-right majority could bring in high-spending policies. Opinion polls had forecast Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally would be the largest party. One investor said Monday's market upturn reflected investor relief at avoiding that outcome. Yet the election leaves France's 577-seat assembly divided into three big groups, with policy direction very uncertain. Investors also worry the left's plans could unwind many of President Emmanuel Macron's pro-market reforms, and they fear a political gridlock could end attempts to rein in France's large debt. One said markets would be watching for any sign of a leftist prime minister being appointed, calling that the biggest concern. Banking stocks took the brunt of early falls, with Societe Generale and BNP Paribas shares down about 1%, but they too later recovered. The euro steadied after initial falls against the dollar and pound.